Good morning, everybody. We'll toss it over to get started. Thank you. All yours.
All right. Welcome, everyone, this morning, and thank you for tuning in for the Lake Houston Area Chamber's webinar series, PPP Loan Forgiveness. I'm Jenna Armstrong, the CEO of the Lake Houston Area Chamber of Commerce, and we've got a great panel discussion planned for everyone today, so thanks for tuning in. Before we get started, we have some important business of sponsor recognition that we'd like to do. We've got several sponsors today. Our presenting sponsor is Minuteman Press of Humble, as well as the Groves Ashlar Development as our gold sponsor. So we'd like to thank them today. I'd also like to toss it over. We've got with us Connie Chandler, who is the owner of Minuteman Press of Humble, and they've been busy over there getting everything back to business. And we'd like to hear from Connie for a couple of minutes. Connie, how are you doing over there?
Doing pretty good. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. And we certainly are privileged to be here with you and be a sponsor. As all of you know, the Chamber is very near and dear to our hearts. And we do what we can to help the Chamber because they do a lot to help us. And we'd like to invite everybody to come by. We have unlocked our doors, which to us is a big deal. Daryl's been begging me for weeks to do that. So we're going to unlock our doors. We're back to normal hours and full time. And we're almost back up to staff where we were before the COVID hit us. And I want to thank the PPP loan for that. Couldn't do it without them. So any of you who need any printing done, it doesn't matter what it is, give us a call. If we can't do it, we certainly will help you find someone. We want to be your one-stop printer. We do everything from business cards to banners, everything in between, even promotional products. And I'd like to thank all of you for looking in today and hope you get a lot out of this. I know I'm going to. And I'd love to thank our sponsors, our speakers. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here to help us through this big ordeal. So thank you, Jenna.
All right, thanks, Connie. We also have one more thank you that we need to get out there before we get going, and that's for Digital Network Associates, DNA Studios, and Sam Schrade for doing this Zoom recording and Facebook Live broadcast for us. We certainly appreciate all the work that you guys do at DNA Studios. And now I'm going to introduce the speakers so I can turn it over to them because I know that's what you are logged in to hear. First joining us is Nicholas Standard. Nicholas is the owner of Standard & Company, a certified public accounting firm located in downtown Humble, Texas, providing personalized and comprehensive tax, accounting, and business consulting services. Nicholas offers 20 years experience in accounting and financial management. As an entrepreneur himself, he understands the unique challenges businesses face, especially in times of disaster. He has a Bachelor of Finance and Accounting, as well as an MBA in Finance and Management from Tulane University. So welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You can do all of our sales pitches for now. That'd be great.
I copied it from your LinkedIn in case you were wondering. So.
Well, don't use my LinkedIn.
I had to make up yours, Mark. You'll hear in a second.
Very good.
Danny Sawyer. Danny Sawyer is the Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending for Plain State Bank in Humble. With more than 30 years experience in the banking industry, Danny has a proven track record of lending to small to mid-sized commercial and industrial clients. Danny has a lengthy tenure as a commercial lender in the Lake Houston area and is involved with many organizations throughout the community. Plain State Bank has been a longtime chamber member and investor in our Lake Houston Economic Development Partnership. Danny's also a graduate of the Chamber's 8th Leadership Lake Houston class and is currently serving in his first year as a board member for our Chamber. And what a year to join our board, Danny. It's been a wild ride in your first 5 months as a board member with us, but thank you for joining us. Also, last, certainly not least, everyone's favorite economic developer, Mark Mitchell. Mark Mitchell has served as the president of the Lake Houston Economic Development Partnership since 2017. He offers more than 20 years of economic development experience from his work in the states of Indiana and Michigan before making his way down to the great state of Texas in 2008. He also brings an impressive background in business tax credits and incentives from his work at Ernst & Young. Following Hurricane Harvey, Mark managed the Lake Houston Harvey Business Recovery Grant Program. And Mark's strength is bringing resources together to help businesses, whether that's with disaster recovery or business expansion, relocation, and business attraction. Mark holds a Master in Business Administration from Anderson University. And like Danny, he is also a graduate of the Leadership Lake Houston class of 2019.
Hey,
Otherwise, they're the self-proclaimed grade 8. Is that correct? The 8th class.
that is correct.
I figured if I didn't mention it, you guys would. So I was trying to scoop you on that. But Mark, I know I'm about to toss it to you, and we're very glad to have all of our very experienced business leaders here with us today. But we know last night the Senate approved the House passed Paycheck Protection Program Reform Bill, which offers extensions for the PPP forgiveness. I know a lot of people have questions about that. I know at this time, unless it has happened in the last 10 minutes, it hasn't been signed by President Trump yet. However,
Yeah,
I know.
that's what I'm saying. We're gonna have,
I know that you guys have been working this morning to evaluate that legislation. So I really think this is a good place, Mark, for the disclaimer that we want to put on this entire.
Actually, before we do the disclaimer, I've got Carol's in the chat, and I just took a phone call. The folks trying to log in are having a problem logging in. So Sam, can we kind of maybe look at that and figure out what's going on?
Absolutely. And for any of those, we will also have this, that it's recorded. We'll be able to send the link out to everyone registered so they can watch this in case they missed all of those great introductions that we did in the beginning, and if they miss any part of this program. So we're recording it. We'll be sending it out. We'll also be posting it on our Facebook pages for the Chamber and for the Economic Development Partnerships to make sure that everyone is able to get that information if they haven't missed anything. But okay, so now the disclaimer. Is this a good time for the disclaimer? Okay.
Yes, and one of the things, we've got some really good news, and I do want to thank Danny and Nick for giving us their time this morning. We wanted to have a local perspective, and especially for the Lake Houston area. So we got two gentlemen that are subject matter experts. The great thing about the Lake Houston area is we've got a myriad of professional folks that are subject matter experts, and they have become subject matter experts on PPP over the last 8 weeks in terms of the rollout. So part of our day today is really to talk about how we best prepare our small businesses for the forgiveness process. So we're going to limit the Q&A today because we've got some good news that the Senate passed House legislation last night, relaxing some of the requirements, giving you breathing room on the timelines. We'll get in a little bit more detail for that later. So given that the administration's got to sign this into law, we're expecting that later this afternoon or at the latest probably tomorrow. We're going to limit the Q&A because there's going to be new documents put out with these relaxed guidance guidelines. And so just going to put that out front here. And then we also are disclaiming that the information that you're receiving today is not legal or tax advice. And we very, very much encourage you to engage with your CPA or your business attorney or your banker to make sure that you're following the criteria and answering the questions correctly. So this is really just an overview for you to be prepared for that loan forgiveness piece and move forward from there. So as we're talking about this, most of the information is going to be talking from a high level perspective of just the overview. And then there's also still $120 billion left in terms of the PPP. So if you combine that with the fact that they're relaxing the guidelines, now is an opportune time to get in the mix and get that application done with your local lender. And we truly encourage you working with local lenders. They have had a much better track record for small businesses than these bigger banks have. And so we've got plenty of small lenders within the Lake Houston area that are both chamber and non-chamber members. And we absolutely encourage you to seek them out in terms of your application. And we've got a few stories of some of our small businesses trying to go down a path with the larger lenders and then actually pivoting to the smaller lenders and getting success. So with that, Sam, I'm going to ask, can I take control now of the screen? Is that okay? Let's see here if I'm technically proficient enough. And so hopefully, and I'll get a nod from my co-presenters. Are you guys seeing the first slide of the PowerPoint? Awesome. So this is just this morning's agenda. We're going to give a very brief overview of the program. We're going to give you a funding summary, and this is actually as of 5/23/2020. We're going to talk about how much forgiveness is available. We're going to talk about a 4-step process, which it's really not a complicated process. We're going to talk about a legislative update. As of 11 o'clock yesterday evening, the Senate passed with a unanimous voice vote new legislation to make it a little bit more attractive and easier on the loan forgiveness piece. One of the things that we thought was really important, there's a whole host of information that's out there in terms of the PPP program and EIDL and everything else. And so what we've done within the PowerPoint is put together several links. And then we're also going to send everyone that's participating the actual form. So you'll have the ability to actually look at the PowerPoint and click on the links in the PowerPoint. We're also going to send you those documents that those links are tied to going forward. And then we're also going to talk about alternative resources in terms of a broader context. So with that said, we'll go to, and let's see here. Now my slide's not scrolling through. There we go. Boom. All right, so quickly, the program parameters haven't changed very much. It's still 500 employees or less. February 15th is still the cutoff date. Still have the ability to go with small businesses, sole proprietors, independent contractors. The amount as far as the actual loan is equivalent to 10 weeks of payroll, and that includes some ancillary operating expenses, but it's over an 8-week period. So Danny kind of made the comment to make sure that people understood that although the dollar amount is based on kind of a 10-week equivalent, there's still an 8-week period, and that 8-week period after the administration signs is actually going to go up to 24 weeks. We'll talk about, there's a 1% interest rate. Actually, the term has been extended. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Restrictions, not for wages exceeding $100,000. Federal employees are excluded, inside the US only. And so again, we'll send this PowerPoint out, but we just want you to have this information, especially if you haven't applied for PPP yet, and we're going to encourage that very strongly once we get into it. And then loan forgiveness, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how that process works. Some of these numbers in here are not relevant anymore based on the new legislation. So again, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And more importantly, and I want to pivot to Danny and to Nick kind of on this data right here is actually from the SBA, and it's where they sat on May 23rd in terms of number of loans and dollar amounts. And so if either of you could kind of chime in on what this opportunity represents to the small businesses that have not engaged in the PPP yet, that'd be really helpful, because you see $511 billion, and there's essentially $640 or $50 billion, if not more, that was actually prescribed for this program. So Danny or Nick, if you guys could kind of speak quickly to what this means for the small businesses that have been pondering this program, that'd be helpful for our start. And well, actually, Danny, I'll say you first.
Actually, I think it means a lot, because there's over 120 billion still available to small businesses. And now that they've expanded from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, that's going to give you an opportunity now to go to your lender and go ahead and apply, because as of June 30th, if the program is going to be over, and you will not be able to apply for any more PPP loans. So if you haven't done so already, I would highly ask you to go to your lender, your local lender here in the Lake Houston area, and sit down and talk with them, call them on the phone or whatever, and be sure you go ahead and take advantage of this. For 24 weeks, it's going to help out a lot of our businesses in the area, though.
And Nick, from a CPA perspective, and I know you're very busy right now with the extended, just regular filing deadline, and then we know you've seen an increase in terms of the PPP applications too. What are your thoughts?
I kind of share the same sentiment there, that, with the double, they ran out of money that first time around, and so that scared a lot of people off in the application process. scared a lot of small businesses off as well, but there's a lot of money out there. Get a little bit of help. It's a program that is going to help your business. I mean, it's enough money to help you through some of these slow times here, and it's worth the time to fill out the application and make this happen.
Right. And then Danny, just from a process perspective, I think, and Nick mentioned that after the dollars ran out the first go round, people got a little bit skittish, but the process in and of itself is fairly simplistic on the banker side. Could you just take a couple of seconds to talk about, what the small business owner should expect in terms of going to their local lender and starting this process? It's not typically an onerous process, is it?
No, it's not. To apply for the loan is very, very easy. Just to kind of give you an example of our bank, Plain State Bank, we have a website. You go in, there's a portal there that will say PPP loan or whatever. You click on that portal, you fill out a couple of questions that we have, and then you'll have a lender that will call you back, send you the package with explanations, that you send it back in, scan it back into to your banker. So most banks will allow you to do that. Fill out the application. There's a worksheet that goes along with it. There's a checklist that will tell you what all the banker is going to need. And then once you give that to us, we will process it. Normally it's taken anywhere from the same day, maybe 48 hours. You'll hear something back with the decision. If the loan is approved, then we will you'll sign a note for the loan that you have. Scan that back into your banker. Be sure you mail the original copy, and then the funds will be. We'll deliver the funds to wherever you want it to be at. Wire transfer, come by, pick up cashier check, whatever you prefer. So it's a very, very easy process to get the loan. And I think that the forgiveness portion of it, once they get it all worked out, I think that's even going to be a much easier process than what it currently is too.
Right. Well, thank you. So with that said, now what we want to do is start to talk about the four-step process in terms of forgiveness. And I will applaud both Treasury and SBA for recognizing the original and early hurdles that were there in terms of this program and really giving the feedback to Congress in terms of how the program needed to be updated to make it more friendly to our small businesses and encourage them not only to look towards rehiring, but to give them kind of light at the end of the tunnel, if you will, in terms of the process. So as we talk about the loan forgiveness strategy, and again, this is to prepare you all for being able to go to ultimately your lender in terms of the forgiveness process. And so the strategy that we've looked at is essentially a strategy that the SBA is espousing in terms of kind of a four-step process. So what we'll do first is really talk about how much can be forgiven in terms of the program itself. And so as we look at these different steps, you can actually get 100% forgiveness based on the qualifying criteria. And again, those criteria are in the midst of changing as of 11 o'clock last night. But as we look at this, with the three-step process, and the fourth step is actually just filling out the actual application itself. But we're looking to determine the maximum amount of potential loan forgiveness. That's going to be based on your expenditures. And you'll see we've got 8/24 week period. So we're until the administration signs this, it's 8 weeks. But once it's signed, it's going to go to 24 week period after your disbursement. You'll still be able to select the payroll cycle if you've got less than a two payment period or if you've got more than 2 pay periods in a month, you'll actually be able to select your start date in terms of payroll. Second step is you'll be looking at loan forgiveness reductions, and we've actually seen a reduction in those requirements in the new legislation that was just passed with the House and Senate. And then also, and really importantly, is the 75% rule is going to be changed to 60%. Now, there's some work that's being done. Senator Rubio is asking for some tweaks to this in terms of eligibility and even some more flexibility, if you will, for small businesses. But that's the crux of this in terms of the 3 steps. And so it's not a difficult process, but it can be a tedious process. Danny, with what you guys are doing right now, have any of your PPP loans expired in terms of that 8-week period under the old guidelines? And what are you guys doing in terms of kind of helping your businesses with the forgiveness piece?
Yes, we've had about a dozen or so. And as we speak, we have them coming up for the expiry date of the 8-week period. We're just letting our clients know that they can go ahead and fill out the 11-page document if you will, or would you rather wait? And everybody has said that they would rather wait because, like you said earlier, it's a tedious process. We are hoping that it won't be that much once everything gets taken care of with the Senate and with the House. But I would highly suggest, get with your lender if you do have one and ask them if you can kind of push that back a little bit also, because you can either go ahead and accept the 8 weeks and ask for forgiveness, or go ahead and go with 24. I like to make sure you know that once you apply for your forgiveness, it can take up to 5 months for that to be forgiven.
Wow.
The bank has 60 days to give it to the SBA. The SBA has 90 days to deposit the funds back into the bank or relieve your debt. So just know that if you choose a 24-week period, you may not be forgiven for that until June or May or June next year. So.
Okay. And then Nick, I know you're preparing or at least assisting your companies with both the preparation on the front side. Have any of your clients come in prepared for the forgiveness aspect yet? And then what are you counseling them on in terms of the process as well?
We're just starting to hit that for most of our clients where they're just getting to the point where we're in week 8. And the big thing that we've been pushing for is just going ahead and getting your paperwork together, regardless of what's going to happen here, unless something does happen. There's some talk about doing some sort of blanket forgiveness for the smaller loans. There's not a lot of movement on that, but there's certainly a lot of people asking for it. But short of something like that occurring, we're going to have payroll reports and those sort of things anyway. And so what we're doing is we're going to go ahead and start helping our clients with the, your payroll journals for that 8-week period, or the, reporting by employee so that the testing can be done for the total payroll limits and those sort of items. And that's stuff it's going to be necessary if you take the 24-week or the 8-week, and probably regardless what happens on the forgiveness. And so there's the opportunity to go ahead and start grabbing those items so that it's not quite so bad when you're ready to pull the trigger and head over to the bank and submit that application.
Right. Very good. And then as we look through or whatever, we also need to make folks aware that even if your loan's not forgiven 100%, there's still the ability to receive some level of prorated forgiveness in terms of the loan. And it really applies to what elements you qualify against. So again, with the recent change in legislation, we're looking at a 5-year maximum at 1% now, which makes a difference for the banks in terms of record keeping and your CPAs. And so again, just be aware that there's that element that's still out there in terms of those changes taking place. And again, there's no prepayment penalties on that. Danny and Nick, I don't know if you have any comments in terms of the proration aspect and that kind of being up in the air right now, but if either you want to speak to that in terms of just the proportional forgiveness.
Just that we expected to go back to that. There is the bill that was passed last night does not have the sliding scale on forgiveness. That is at the 60% and all or nothing. But even the legislators who submitted the bill said that was not their intent. And so everyone is expecting that to be fixed before it hits the president's desk. And so there isn't any reason to believe that it's going to stay at the sort of cliff at 60%. But, again, that's how it's written at the moment. And then, of course, the 2-year change to 5 years.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then what we'll do now is pivot to just the record keeping requirements. And so I'll ask both you, Danny and Nick, in terms of each of these. As we look at the payroll documents, we're looking at bank statements or third-party payroll reports, Form 941. So Danny, in terms of your process internally, do you guys have a checklist for your borrowers that essentially has all that information contained in it to kind of move forward? We will send this PowerPoint out, and we're also going to send out a guideline that's probably going to change in the next few days as well, that was put together by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, that goes into really granular detail in terms of the documentation and record keeping. But Danny, if you could kind of talk to us about what you're informing your borrowers on relative to the record keeping.
Well, the main thing is that, we let them know that they can always be audited. If they got $2 million or more, of course, which is very rare for our area, but if anyone did, they can, possibly expect an audit. If you're not audited, which, I don't see how they can audit everybody, but please keep all your records that you're going to give to your bank to satisfy the requirements. Be sure you keep those for at least 6 years, somewhere safe, be it on your laptop or wherever you can keep them. Because if they do decide to come back later and audit you, you will need to have those documents to show. As far as checklist, the checklist is going to be combined with the package, which you'll be receiving from your lender or from your CPA, or your CPA will have it. Your CPA will go over it with you. But the checklist is already contained within the 11-page document that we get from the SBA.
Right.
So we just go by what they have, and the items you have here on the screen is exactly what I've seen on the checklist as well.
Okay. And Nick, any thoughts on your side?
No, that's the same thing that we're seeing. The only thing, and we talked about this in the last PPP meeting, that individual banks are going to ask for individual things, and so
Right.
they have the right to kind of tailor the plan that they want to go with, and so just be prepared to be flexible on it. And for most people, the most difficult thing here to grab is going to be those payroll reports, and a lot of the payroll providers, certainly the larger payroll providers, now have custom reporting that they've built specifically for this loan, and that's been super helpful. And then, of course, digging up leases that you probably haven't seen in a long time.
Right. One comment I would like to speak to, though, on the non-payroll expenses. Early on, there was some confusion or lack of clarity around the mortgage interest piece, or just the business interest piece, and it was business mortgage interest. But one of the things that appears to have been opened up, and we had the good fortune of having Tim Jeffcoat on yesterday with a more Q&A type setting for both EIDL and PPP, is that business interest can include not only real property, but personal property as well. So with the reduction in terms of the 75% or of payroll that's being reduced now to 60, you've got the ability to also look at business interest that's not real property. So that's one of the things as we're going through this process. Again, this is all the more attractive in terms of our small businesses being able to take advantage of that in terms of the PPP forgiveness piece. And so with that said, we'll go to what is probably the most exciting thing for us this morning, is that, again, the House passed this bill on May 28th, and the Senate passed it literally last night at 11:03 p.m. With a unanimous voice vote. And essentially what they've looked to do is reduce the share of money in terms of payroll expenses and increase the ancillary expenses. They've extended the window businesses have to use the funds. They've pushed back the June 30 deadline, and we'll get into a little bit more detail with that. They've extended the time recipients have to repay the loan, and they've let companies that get loan forgiveness defer payroll taxes. So this is primarily a House passed bill from last week. And then fortunately, last night there was one senator that was holding out in terms of the voice vote. And that individual had his needs met in terms of what he required. And so we're looking at, this essentially being what the Senate legislation mirrored in terms of the House's piece. And so as we talk about that 8-week period extending to 24 weeks, Nick, how important is that for you all in terms of you've got a July 15 deadline kind of around the corner? How much breathing room does this give you and your small business owners?
Oh, it's tremendous for us. I mean, just trying to handle all of this paperwork at the same time, was incredibly helpful from a firm standpoint. And then certainly, there were a lot of businesses that were kind of running into an inability to hit that 75%. And so that little bit of extra time to be able to still spend that money on payroll has been very helpful as well. I think that's that extra time period, because things were slowing down and people, hey, you're trying to figure out how you're going to manage through this downturn, and one of the ways that you're doing that is reducing hours and all of those sorts of things. And so there are a lot of people who were cutting it really close on the forgiveness at the 75%. So I think it's it's going to be great.
Right. The other thing in terms of the repayment period, now from a record keeping perspective, was it, and this is a question I'm asking the two of you as subject matter experts. So from a records retention perspective, has this extension of the pay period really changed anything in terms of the business owner having to retain those documents for 6 years? Wasn't there a 6-year window to retain those documents anyway in terms of the submission for the loan itself?
In my opinion, it doesn't change any, it really doesn't change too much here, the window to hold things. I mean, the requirements for holding payroll data is longer than 6 years anyway. And so you're really supposed to be hanging on to W-2s and 941s and all those sort of items longer than 6 years anyhow. You really should be hanging on to it for quite some time when you get to W-2s and things, but digress there. So it shouldn't really change the way that you were record keeping.
And so as we look at that from a business perspective, that's just kind of gravy for the business in terms of extending that repayment period and probably helping them out from a cash flow perspective with that amortized out over 5 versus 2 years.
Right.
Yeah, okay. And then, of course, importantly, and then you kind of touched on this already, but dropping from 75% of payroll down to 60%, and then with the ability to include interest, rent, and again, interest on mortgage, interest on business transactions, and then rent and utility payments. Now that's up to 40%. That's a huge opportunity that you've already acknowledged. And Nicholas, can you speak to the penalty and reduction in workforce date rollback? I think that's rolled back to 12/31 now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, if I can go back to that third bullet point too, the interest piece that you were talking about, they did the same thing. The Treasury Department ruled the same on the rent and lease agreements as well. And so, we were originally addressing that as just a facility rental, so real property rental, but that's been extended.
So car leases now?
Yeah, it's a personal property now. And so you're talking about copy machines, vehicles, all of those sort of things that you may have lease agreements, long-term leases with, bargain purchase options and all that sort of stuff that's around the office now counts. But yeah, certainly the current understanding of what was passed last night is that the workforce date rollback is to December 31st as well. And so that's going to give you a little more time to add people back, to rehire. Really, it's the full-time equivalent calculation that, even as an accountant, you look at that thing and it's a little scary, but it's, but you're going to have a little more time to deal with it. And so as you are able to get your business back up and running and things are building up, you'll have that opportunity to start bringing people on and hit those numbers without causing yourself any additional harm. And there's still exceptions on that as well. There's not a ton of guidance on how those exceptions are going to work. But I'm kind of jumping a bullet point there, but there's a little bit of that with the inability to hire, and hey, my business just didn't come back to 100%, or it only came back to 90%. And so I just don't have the ability to go back to full staff.
Right. And that's an important distinction in terms of where we go. And that's one of the reasons that, again, we're not giving legal or tax advice today. We're simply trying to make our small business owners aware, number one, that there's still $120 billion left. Number two, that we've had significant easing in those parameters in terms of forgiveness. And then also to definitely seek out your CPA, your banker, your business attorney, and making sure that they've got the most current or recent federal registers, application, guidance, and everything else in terms of making this happen. And then our last bullet point, and I've read some different things on this in terms of whether it's a good thing or not, but the deferral of employer share of payroll taxes. And so I'm trying to figure out why that's a good thing. And so Nick or Danny, either one, if you could kind of weigh in on whether you think that's positive or not necessarily positive. I think the employer has the option of deferring But what are your thoughts in terms of just, business sense in terms of that deferral piece?
Nick?
All right. Well,
You're the CPA.
it's certainly an option for a small business owner. And I think that if you're in a situation where you need to take it, again, you need to be consulting with your own accountant on this. The general advice that we've been giving our clients is that we really don't want you to do this. It's a difficult thing. It's going to be a fairly difficult thing for you to track, and it's going to be difficult to catch up. And so if you have the funds to do it, payroll taxes is generally one of those things we don't like to mess with. The penalties and the issues that go along with it are bigger than you'd like to deal with. And so in general, we've been telling our clients that unless you are in a situation where you absolutely have to defer those payroll tax payments, just keep up with them.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. And here's a question, and you've both alluded to this. We're getting really close to early movers that actually made PPP application and actually received funds. And they're fast approaching their 8 weeks. Now, with this new guidance that was passed last night and will likely be signed into law, is there any downside or benefit? If you're 6 weeks in, do you have to adhere to the original guidance, or is there any flexibility in terms of that 8 week to 24 window being opened up? And can they take advantage of that in terms of where they sit right now? If they're kind of on the 6 or 7 or 8 week cusp of their 8 week period, where does that leave them in terms of this new legislation?
Actually, what I would do is if they're on the 6th or 7th week, it's their decision if they want to go ahead and do, if they've already, expended all their monies and they're ready to go ahead and ask for the forgiveness, go ahead and do it now. Because like I said, it's going to be a 5-month process before it comes back. It's also going to be, the bank's going to also have to get, revised notes out because, we have 2 years note. Now we have to go to 5 years. So there's going to be a lot of changes that's going to come from the bank if you already have a PPP loan. So again, if you're on here, I would also, get with your banker, ask them about, that process. But it's your decision. If you want to go for the 8 week window and go ahead and start your forgiveness. If you've expended all funds, I would suggest to go ahead and do that. If not, if you haven't expended all the funds, then I would go ahead and take advantage of the 24 weeks. So.
Right now, and with that pivot, is there anything that they have to do from a paperwork perspective if they've already started? So once this is signed into law, then they'll essentially automatically have that option to extend out. Let's say they're only at 70% in terms of the payroll piece and 30% in terms of the ancillary. So this extra window gives, number one, it gives them a different proportional ratio, right? It drops them down to 65%, but it also gives them a little bit more latitude in terms of just the forgiveness piece. So Nick, is that kind of your perspective as well?
It is. I agree. I mean, if the calculation at this moment says that you can get yours 100% forgiven, I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't go ahead and at least start the process. I mean, okay. I think the SBA is calling it a 4-day process if you try to do it yourself. And so why not go ahead and just get it taken care of?
All right. And again, and I want to roll back real quick just to kind of talk about that. And again, this is the 4-step process that Nick just referenced. We've only got 3 of them on here because the 4th process is actually filling out the application. But determining the potential loan forgiveness, determine any potential reductions, and then essentially now looking at a 60-40 rule as opposed to a 75-25. And again, the process is not difficult per se, it's just tedious. So if you've got 35 employees, you're going to have to do this calculation 35 times, essentially in the aggregate to get to where you need to get to. But the really cool thing is, again, they've opened up a really big window in terms of us being able to help small businesses get to that forgiveness piece. And Nick and Danny also mentioned that there is a rumbling going around that maybe there'll be a $150,000 or $250,000 automatic forgiveness piece that's passed in terms of small businesses. That would make everyone's life a whole lot easier. I think the average loan is, Danny, is 175,000 or something like that in terms of just the overall program. So if they could come up with something meaningful like that, it'd be really good for everybody in terms of business.
Oh, I say praise the Lord on that one for sure, because that makes our job that much easier than Mark as well, because yeah, it makes it good for the business owners too.
Okay. Well then, and we talked about this too, there is a myriad of places to kind of look for all of this data. And so what we've tried to do is compile what we thought were the important PPP URLs that are out there. So there's a 20 some odd page FAQ that was published on May 27th from the Treasury. It's got literally 48 different questions in it. I'm suspecting that this document will get changed here in the next day or two to be reflective of those changes that were made last night. And of course, after the administration signs, but we've included that. We've included the actual application in terms of the loan forgiveness. What I think was really cool, if you look at the lower right-hand screen, the Paycheck Protection Program, that's the essentially presentation that the SBA gives on how much dollars they've given out. Again, there's $120 billion still out there. And now with these new guidelines, it should be a lot more comforting for our small businesses to know that they've got the ability to have this forgiven. We've got another thing that was provided by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that's a really detailed guideline in terms of those actual steps. I'm suspecting that that's going to get changed as well to reflect these new statutes that were passed last night. And then we've also included the most recent Federal Register from June 1, which will probably be a new Federal Register coming out with guidance on these recent statutory changes. But we wanted, and we're going to send these physical documents out to everyone that was on the registration that signed up, just so you've got them. And worst case scenario, if they get changed, and you can essentially use maybe those same links to do a search to find the updated documents. But this way you won't be kind of fumbling around trying to find all this stuff while you're trying to run your business as well. And with that said, we'll kind of wrap up and say these are resources that are still available and still out there. And I am absolutely proposing that you talk to your local banker, your local CPA, your local business attorney. They are much more effective in maneuvering through this process going forward. SBA still has existing programs, bridge loans that are still out there that you can take advantage of. There's still employee retention credits out there. Those are mutually exclusive though with either the EIDL or PPP. So you really need to talk to your CPA or business attorney about looking at those. SBA is still definitely helping folks out there from a business counseling perspective. Again, local lending institutions, including banks and credit unions, is essential. They are the boots on the ground in terms of making sure that you take advantage of this the right way. Unfortunately, chambers of commerce were still not included in this most recently passed piece of legislation. So we're being asked to help, but not being helped. So hopefully, eventually something comes out in terms of the 501c6s being able to apply for the PPP. And then of course, we still got CDFI, small business lenders like Lift Fund, who loan up to $5 million. So with that said, any closing comments, Nick, Danny, on just where we're at today in terms of the PPP program?
I'm good.
Good. Nick, anything on your side?
Reiterating what you said, keep in touch with your accountant, get those payroll reports. These are people that you should be talking to, your banker, find out if there are going to be any specific requirements for the bank that you worked with. You know, start gathering that data so it's easier for you.
All right. Well, very good. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully this was beneficial to you, and hopefully the following information will be helpful as well. I want to definitely thank Minuteman Press, Connie Chandler, for sponsoring our webinar series, both today and yesterday with the SBA. I want to thank the Groves Ashlar Development participating with us as well. And as always, DNA Studios and Sam Schrade. We couldn't do this without him, and very thankful for him. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And Nick and Danny, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. All right.